Okay, sort myself out. Hello, welcome back to these English Comprehension videos. Currently, at the time of recording, supplementing your summer school tutoring. Hopefully these are helping improve your English. Hopefully by doing these you're seeing ways to work out the questions. You're getting an indication mainly of the sort of speed you should be working at as well. You should not have to keep flicking back and forth. That is the main thing I'm trying to instill. If it helps you to highlight things as you go, please highlight things, but of course you don't know the questions. So your highlighting may be aimless, maybe hapless. It might be aimless, ultimately. Aimless, yes. Without point if you don't know what you're actually looking for. But the main two things that I think are useful are that comprehension geography, build yourself a map, know where things are. And all of that comes from the simplest rule of all, which is paying attention. Really focusing on that first read through. And then when you need to define phrases or words you're unfamiliar with and you haven't got any clues in the word itself, or you don't remember anything about the word, you can't recall seeing it anywhere else, context. Context, use the words surround it. What is going on, the content in the comprehension. There is one thing slightly unrelated to comprehension I would like to discuss first, because at the time of recording we recently had a mock exam where quite a few of you asked me a question, and that was, "Sir Fred, what is wrong with auxiliary? Why is that auxiliary? Yeah, sorry. What is an auxiliary verb?" Yes, pardon me. What is an auxiliary verb? These auxiliary kind of means helping. They're helping verbs. They help to form sentences. They help to give sentences meaning. They perform a functional, grammatical task, role. And that relates to indicating the tense that we're in a sentence, or the mood of the sentence, or the voice who is speaking, where the emphasis is, whether the person, whether the subject or the object of a sentence is performing an action, or is the action is being performed unto them. It coordinates word order, things like this. They are very important verbs, not just in English, but in other languages as well. You have to forgive me, I only really know about European languages. Very important in things like German and French and Italian. They help structure sentences. They accompany another verb in the sentence. That's often the main meaning of the sentence. The secondary verb, the auxiliary verb, helps give sort of syntactic, grammatical meaning. And there are three main ones in the English language. Three main ones. And you have to have, to be, and to do. When we say to have, that's quite straightforward. Similarly with to do, it's quite straightforward. I have, you have, he, she, it has. I'm conjugating it. We've spoken about this before. I'm finding the conjugations of these verbs. I have, you have, he, she, it has, etc. I do, you do, he, she, it does, etc. To be is I am. We all know to be. I am, you are, he, she, it is. We are, you, plural, are, they are. These three, you will find them very often in multiple sentences. They are playing a game. Playing is the verb that indicates the main meaning of the sentence, but are, to be there, indicates tense, who's doing it, word order, emphasis, all of these things. We can see how the sentence is a sentence, they are playing over there. They playing over there doesn't make sense anymore. They playing over there doesn't make any sense. They are playing over there makes sense. They had chicken for dinner, perhaps. They had chicken for dinner. They had roast chicken for dinner. They roast chicken for dinner. They roast chicken for dinner doesn't make sense anymore. They ate roast chicken for dinner. You don't need the auxiliary verb in there anymore. But they had eaten is where the two verbs come in, right? They had eaten roast chicken. They have eaten roast chicken. Sentences. Look, I mean, we can scroll down. They had built a thriving community. See it there. They had built a thriving community. You need the auxiliary verb to indicate tense before built, past participle of to build, exists in that sentence as well, right? These neighbouring villages had thrived, right? We see how we need that auxiliary verb to make the sentence mean something, to function. I hope that has explained that one. Let's go on to Comprehension 21 now. The values lesson, unity in the orchard. Let's read it, let's define some words, let's look at the questions. Unless it's gone blurry. Okay, good. In the heart of a verdant valley. So, when you see V-E-R-D, verd, it often relates to the colour green. Okay, so if something's verdant, it's a very rich green. It's particularly green, right? In the heart of a verdant valley, nestled between towering mountains, there lay two villages, Evergreen and Brookside. For generations, these neighbouring villages had thrived, their people coexisting in harmony. Together, they had built a thriving community, relying on each other's strength to overcome challenges that befell them. Befell, past participle of to befall. If something befalls, it happens, but it's normally related to something particularly bad. So challenges that befell them means, difficult, tough challenges that have come in the past. One fateful year, an unrelenting, unending, unceasing, right? Doesn't give up. An unrelenting drought gripped the valley, causing crops to wither. If something withers, it becomes dry, it becomes shriveled. We see it with plants, especially in the summertime, right? And the once gushing river that flowed between the villages to run dry. The people of Evergreen, who are known for their resourcefulness, we see the word resource in there, it's a compound word, yeah? It's to do with inventiveness or ingenuity. Managed to dig deep wells to access the groundwater. They offered to share this precious resource with Brookside, but under one condition. They requested a portion of Brookside's bountiful apple orchards in return. The leaders of Brookside, proud of their orchards and fearing they would never regain their full yield after the drought, hesitated to make such a trade. They believed that the apples were their lifeblood. That's another compound word. Don't think too hard about it. Lifeblood. It's crucial to their survival, right? They couldn't bear to part with them. As weeks turned into months, tensions rose, and the villagers found themselves on the brink of a bitter feud. Use the context there. Found themselves on the brink of a bitter feud. They're not in the feud just yet. They're about to go into it, yeah? They're about to. If you're on the brink, bitter feud, you're on the brink. You're just there. You're wobbling. The edge. The precipice. The edge, yeah? So, one evening, as the villagers of both Evergreen and Brookside gathered by the empty riverbed to voice their grievances, we see the word grieve in there. To grieve is to mourn someone. A grievance is a problem. It's an issue, yeah? A complaint. An elderly traveller arrived in the valley with a wise demeanour and silver hair. A demeanour. What we're talking about his appearance here, so it's got to be something to do with appearance. A demeanour. A demeanour is his character, the way he holds himself. Someone can look wise, they can act wise. His behaviour is wise, suggests wisdom. He listened carefully to the villagers' woes and soon realised the depth of their stubbornness. We've had a printing error here, so jump down to the next paragraph. Addressing the villagers, he told them a tale from his own past about two neighbouring villages, much like Evergreen and Brookside. These villages had once been consumed by a fierce rivalry, refusing to cooperate, just as they were doing now. The rivalry eventually led to their mutual shared downfall as their resources depleted, reduced drastically, and they faced dire, extremely negative consequences. The old traveller's story struck a chord with the villagers. Idiomatic phrase. An idiom is a phrase that isn't meant literally. It's one that we just use to mean something. You get different ones in different languages. An English one here. Something strikes a chord. You got a question on that later. They realised that their stubbornness and unwillingness to compromise were leading them down a destructive path. Fearing that history might repeat itself, the leaders of Evergreen and Brookside decided to set aside their pride and find a solution together. Gathering their resources, they devised an ingenious plan. Evergreen would share their groundwater, and Brookside would provide their apples. Together, they would create a bountiful orchard near the riverbed, ensuring a sustainable future for both villages. As they worked side by side to bring their plan to fruition, this is the realization of a plan. It becomes realized, it's actioned, it becomes real. The spirit of unity and cooperation blossomed among them. Years passed, and the villages of Evergreen and Brookside thrived once again, stronger and more prosperous than ever before. The lesson they had learned was clear. Cooperation and compromise were the keys to prosperity, and the bonds of unity were more valuable than any individual resource. The valley that once teetered on the brink, on the edge of conflict, now stood as a shining example to all who passed through it, reminding them of the enduring power of cooperation and the perils of stubbornness and pride. Right, I hope you're paying attention. There's no shame, there's nothing wrong with needing to flick back, to check things if you need to double check that it says exactly what you remember it saying. I encourage you to do so. You can never be too careful, you can never be too sure. However, please don't waste time by not paying attention the first time around and forgetting everything. You have to take it in, you have to process it. What lesson did the villages of Evergreen and Brookside learn from their ordeal? Well, if we're talking about a lesson being learned, traditionally you'll find that at the end of a story, won't you? So, well, let's look here. What lesson did the villagers of Evergreen and Brookside learn from their ordeal? The lesson, I see the word lesson. Here we go. They had learned was clear. Cooperation and compromise. Cooperation, working together. Compromise, finding deals together, were the keys to prosperity, to success. And the bonds of unity were more valuable than any individual resource. So, what lesson did the villagers of Evergreen and Brookside learn from their ordeal? Cooperation and compromise are unimportant, definitely not, get rid of that. Rivalry and pride lead to success. It didn't. They only found success after they worked together. Unity and working together are key to prosperity. Those are synonyms of cooperation and compromise. Let's say C and move on to question 2. Why were the leaders of Brookside initially reluctant to agree to Evergreen's offer? Now, we should remember this. We shouldn't have to look back. Evergreen and Brookside, the two places. Evergreen has something to offer. Brookside has something to offer. What was the trade that Evergreen suggested? We should be able to remember this. We should have paid enough attention. It was the reason for their conflict. This is an important point. The reason for their conflict. Imagine it like a film. We need tension for a film to exist in the first place. Otherwise, it would be a really boring film where nothing happens and everyone's quite happy. Nothing changes at the start, nothing's changed by the end. The tension here is the drought, and there's a lack of water and crops. Evergreen have underground water. Brookside have apples. They were scared of losing all of their apples, so 2 is B. 3. How did the elderly traveller's story from his past emphasise the importance of cooperation? So, we can use some logic here as well. Did he highlight the benefits of rivalry? He can't have done, because we've already discovered that the main lesson being taught here is the importance of cooperation. He showcased the value of stubbornness, equally invaluable by the end of the text. He explained the consequences of cooperation. Does he talk about secrecy? No. Does he talk about beauty? No. Process of elimination, we've used logic as well. 3 has to be C. 4. How did Evergreen and Brookside ultimately resolve their conflict? What was the resolution? Do you remember that? They decided to go their separate ways? No. They compromised and worked together to create a sustainable orchard. Let's double check that one. So, pooling their resources, they devised an ingenious plan. They would create a bountiful orchard, a new orchard that would ensure a sustainable future. It's a new orchard. This one, 4, has to be B. 5. What resource became scarce? There was very little of it, scarce even, during the drought in the valley. Well, this should be obvious, we've just said it. Apples and pears were never mentioned, gold and silver never mentioned, livestock and poultry never mentioned, precious gems and minerals never mentioned. This should be a very easy one, if you paid attention, if you know the story. It's C, freshwater and crops. Obvious as well, what happens in a drought? Why did the elderly traveller's arrival have a significant impact on the villagers? Well, what did he do? What did he actually cause to happen? It was his tale that resonated with them. He didn't make it rain, there were no valuable goods, there was no competition, he didn't threaten to leave the valley, he'd only just got there. It has to be C. 6 has to be C. So 7, this is testing our processing of the comprehension to make sure we know what's true, what's false. Which of the following sentences is true? What actually happened in the text? So, Evergreen and Brookside were destroyed by their stubbornness. They never found a solution. They did. Remember how it ends. It's positive. The elderly traveller's silver hair played a critical role. No, it didn't. That was just a description of the character. The drought in the valley was a result of Evergreen and Brookside's refusal to cooperate. Not at all. The drought had nothing to do with them. They didn't cause it. Cooperation and compromise are unnecessary. Well, the only way they got out of it was through those things. Remember, that was the only thing that yielded prosperity. The last option here. The story highlights the importance of cooperation and compromise in overcoming challenges and building a prosperous future. That sounds like exactly what I've just said, so I would agree with E. Which of the following sentences is false? Let's go back the other way. The two villages in the story are named Evergreen and Brookside. True, not false. Don't get confused by the word order. Please, in English comprehension, what you have a lot of, and this is going to sound obvious, but listen to me when I say this, is words. English comprehension has a lot of words, and it's very easy, even when you're confident, you think you know what you've read. It's very easy to get muddled. It's very easy to keep reading the same words and going, oh, this is obvious. Don't be distracted. Don't be led down a wrong path. We're being asked, what is false? We need to find the wrong sentence out of these. B. The traveller who arrived in the valley has silver hair. That's true. Move on. C. The villagers initially refused to cooperate. That's true. Move on. D. The villagers built a towering wall. Where was the wall mentioned? I remember no wall. Has to be D there. It should be obvious. It's a glaring one. There was no wall. 9. What did the author mean in paragraph 5 by they face dire consequences? Well, we've defined dire, haven't we? You should know what dire is. You can pause it. Try and remember what I said when I defined dire. Severe and negative outcomes. Serious and negative, yeah, is what the word dire means. 10. We've hit a decade of questions. What was the final lesson of the story? The final lesson, well, technically we've sort of already answered this. Cooperation and compromise, those two words again, but read the whole answer. Don't presume, because it might end by saying, are not the answers. Cooperation and compromise were not the solution. They are keys to prosperity. They are what they needed. Tennessee. Right. Last page of questions here. We've done that one already. We're ticking them off, guys. So, 11. What is the significance of the drought in this story? Now this, it's asking you for a bit more of an inference here, a bit more of a deduction. When we talk about the structuring of a narrative, what does the drought do? It's a point of tension, isn't it? We spoke about this. We need tension in a story for something to happen, a story to exist in the first place. So the drought is a tension point that causes the two people, the villagers, to have that clash of interests. Yeah, that issue with the trade offer. Then the old man shows up and said, "This is silly. You're both suffering. You need to get out of the drought. You're both not helping each other. You need to work together." So it didn't cause the traveller to come to the town. He was going on his way. It serves as a symbol for adversity and hardship. We'll come back to that. It reminds the reader of the importance of taking care of their environment. This isn't a bit of writing about climate change or anything. It caused the apple crop to diminish. It did, but is that significant necessarily? Is that the main significance of the drought in the story? Because it also caused some waters to dry up, but D doesn't mention that. It makes the soil and the sand and land more arid, causing villagers to become ill. It never mentioned them becoming ill. A symbol for adversity and hardship. Very often things can serve as symbols in bits of writing, stories, fiction. They represent things greater than themselves. Here, the drought isn't just a lack of rainwater. It's the piece of tension that causes the story to exist. It is the challenge. It is the adversity that people come together to defeat. It's the moral. It's the start of the moral, right? It's the thing that needs to be defeated. Let's say B for 11. 12. What is the literary genre of the story? Is it a mystery? No. Is it fantasy? Definitely not. Is it historical fiction? It's not set in history. Is it science fiction? It's not set in space. Folklore. Folklore. When we say the word folklore, we are talking about stories passed down in particular cultures. They are myths. They are legends, very often passed by word of mouth. This one is about two specific villages, Brookside and Evergreen, and it seems to be about a conflict from a very long time ago that teaches a lesson at the end. Folklore very often has a moral to it sometimes as well. Folklore is your correct answer here. Folklore, the myths and legends of a certain place. What did the author mean by voice their grievances? Well, we've defined grievances, haven't we, as problems, as issues. The villagers were complaining and expressing their problems. That seems obvious enough to me. Let's say C for 13. 3 more questions. What did the author mean? I told you we get to it. Struck a chord in the 6th paragraph. It's an idiomatic phrase, an idiom. I-D-I-O-M, idiom. The author was describing a musical performance. There was no music. No one started dancing. The author was indicating that the wise traveller played a musical instrument. Still no music. The author was suggesting that the wise traveller made a resonant sound. There's still literally no music. When he struck that chord, the result, if you remember, in the comprehension, the people didn't get up and start dancing. What does it actually say? The old travel story struck a chord with the villagers. Then they realised what they were doing wrong in not compromising. The story strikes a chord, and it helps them to see that they need to work together. So let's come back here. The author was conveying that the wise traveller's story resonated emotionally with the villagers. It caused a reaction. It made them think. Has to be D. What is the grammatical role of the word own in the following? He told them a tale from his own past. So it could just be, he told them a tale from his past. Sentence still makes sense. A bit simpler, but it makes sense. His own past adds a tiny bit more of a clarification, a bit for information. If his past, the past here is a thing. The past, a thing, right? It's a noun. When you put a word in front of a noun to give it a bit more description, it has to always be, well, not always, but, commonly, it's an adjective, yeah? So, own here is an adjective. 15 should be A. 16, last question. What is the grammatical role of the word resource in the last paragraph? Again, there are certain questions that if we are on it, if we're really focused, we should not need to look back at all. Resource. A resource is an item, isn't it? Resources. When you go to school, teaching resources are pens, pencils, workbooks, things like that. Whiteboards, whiteboard pens, scissors, glue, whatever. Teaching resources. PowerPoint could be a teaching resource. Worksheets, flashcards, teaching resources, things. So it's a noun, yeah. So it has to be a noun. 16 has to be A. Right, that's another one done. I hope these are helping. We'll see you next time.